Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, and it's open forum. 2 hours of open forum with our guest Jimmy Akin today. Just a quick word. We covered some of the Pope stuff yesterday on the shows. If you want to refer to those, I'm only saying that just because we're not going to take a million calls on that today, and I don't want every single human to be dialing. You can just refer to yesterday's show or to our social media. Our number here is 888-318-7884, and open forum means open to anyone. If you have a question about the Catholic faith, you are welcome to call. And you know something, it doesn't have to just be about the Catholic faith. Maybe you have a moral or ethical question, a philosophical question that you would like to ask. And as you probably know, when Jimmy's on, the only other topic that we take is everything else except for sports. 888-318-7884, the number. Jimmy is the author of The Bible is a Catholic Book. He's the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, which is becoming a very popular corner of the internet for people who like reasoned thinking about exciting topics. Jimmy, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Always a pleasure, Cy.
I thought of you today, and you're going to have to help me about, I can't quite think of why this made me think of you, but the sad news came that the amazing Randy had died.
Yes, I saw that.
And I don't know why I associate him with you. It could be the beards, but it could also be a certain kind of thinking about things. Like he was a very... I always valued him as a debunker of things that really needed somebody to debunk them.
Uh-huh.
I don't know how you felt about him, but...
I thought he was a jerk.
Did you really?
Yeah. But he did make... I mean, even jerks can make valuable contributions. So he did debunk some things that very much did need debunking. He also, though... I mean, he was too much a debunker. He went after things that there is more basis to than he was willing to acknowledge.
Yeah.
And he definitely had a prickly personality and sharp elbows and other interesting aspects. His dying wish, though, I've been aware for some time that his wish for after he died was to have his body cremated and then to have his ashes blown in the face of psychic Uri Geller. So we'll have to see if that wish gets fulfilled or not.
That's how I know him, as the guy that debunked Uri Geller, and other people who really I personally just find them so offensive because of the way that they prey on people who don't in any way deserve to be preyed on. You know, these fake psychics and. What's the other thing? People who talk to the mediums, that kind of thing. But I didn't know all the rest of that about the amazing Randy. But may he rest in peace.
Yes. Even though he didn't acknowledge that, as far as I'm aware, he didn't acknowledge that there was any peace for him to rest in. But let's hope he does anyway.
I had heard that. But the thing about there was a way that there was a guy who could turn the pages of a book with his mind. I'm sure you remember this from the Johnny Carson show. And the way that the amazing Randy showed that it was just a trick was by putting a
glass case over it?
No, by putting little peanuts, packing peanuts all around it. So that if you blew, it would...
disturb the
peanuts. And then the guy, amazing, he just said, I just don't have the psychic strength to do it today on the Johnny Carson show. 888-318-7884, our number. We do welcome all callers, whether you are Catholic or not, whether you're Christian or not. If you have a question, we'd like to do our very best to get you an answer. Jimmy Akin is our guest. I am having a little trouble with the stack, so somebody might have to help me when it's time to go to calls. 888-31-TRUTH, the number. Jimmy, also today, I just want you to know it's my mother's birthday, and I don't...
Hey!
I know.
Happy birthday, Mom.
I wasn't sure if it was okay to say happy birthday to my mom on the air, but...
I will.
She'll be delighted that Jimmy Akin said happy birthday to her. Happy birthday, Mom. Thanks for everything. She literally gave me everything, and I appreciate it.
Except half your genome.
Well, that's right. That's true.
That came from your father.
Yeah.
But happy birthday, Mrs. Kellett.
Yeah. Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks for wishing her a happy birthday. Can you push the buttons on the phone for me, Eric? Because I can't do it for some reason right now. Let's go to Zolt in Los Angeles, California, listening on Immaculate Heart Radio. Zolt, your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hi, how are you guys? I have a quick question about apostolic succession.
Okay.
I understand that the Roman Catholic Church teaches that they have the apostolic succession, but they also concur that the Orthodox Church has it. And my question is how is it possible that both churches have apostolic succession, yet they differ?
Okay. Well, it's possible for them to both have it because what apostolic succession refers to principally is the valid exercise of the sacrament of holy orders, which is what's used to ordain bishops, priests, and deacons. And so as long as you have and the key office among those three is the bishop, because it's the bishop who then ordains priests and deacons. And so as long as you have a valid exercise of the sacrament of holy orders so that you have a line of bishops that connects your church back to the apostles in succession with each other, you have what's called apostolic succession. Unfortunately, the valid exercise of the sacrament of holy orders does not guarantee that you're going to be in full communion with each other or that you're all going to agree about everything. And so consequently, that's why it's possible for the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church and the Assyrian Church and the Coptic Church and the other churches that have valid holy orders. That's why it's possible for them to have some differences and not all be in full communion with each other. So it's the valid exercise of holy orders that makes it possible for these churches to have apostolic succession, and it's the exercise of human free will that allows them to be in difference from each other.
So my confusion is, because I was familiar with that, is that if it's the Holy Spirit which is guiding through the succession of the apostolic succession, and they are guiding all, let's say, the above-mentioned 4 or 5 churches, since there is only one God, one unity, and there is no confusion in God, how is it possible that, let's say, for example, was the Holy Spirit sent by the Father or the Father and the Son, which is one difference between the Orthodox and the Catholics? How is it possible that one Holy Spirit would say it's sent by the Father, but the other Holy Spirit would say it's sent by the Father and the Son, yet it's not a confusion to which John warns us against?
Okay, so the Holy Spirit does work in the world, and in a special way among Christians, and in a special way among Christians in whose communities apostolic succession has been preserved. And that's one reason why, even though there are divisions between the different churches I mentioned, they actually still agree with each other far more than they don't. Even if you compare those churches to, let's say, the Protestant community, which unfortunately does not have apostolic succession, if you look at the ones that do, they are in overwhelming agreement with each other. And so the Holy Spirit does seem to work through them in a special way. But once again, humans are flawed, and they have free will, and they can misunderstand things, and they can choose to believe things that they shouldn't. This is something we see in the New Testament itself. If you read the letters in the New Testament, St. Paul is having to regularly correct various people right then in the first generation of Christians, because some of them, even though the Holy Spirit was working in their lives, like in the Church of Corinth, they had factions. In fact, those are 2 of the distinctive notes in Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. He both talks to them about their faction problem, that they've been splitting up into factions, and he talks to them about the role of spiritual gifts and how they should be properly exercised in their church. So right there in 1 Corinthians, we see that the Holy Spirit is working through the church in Corinth, but that's not stopping divisions from springing up among people because of their human flaws and limitations under original sin. And what we see in the church today and in subsequent history is essentially a reflection of those same 2 realities. The Holy Spirit does work in the Christian community, but not in such a way that it prevents all division and misunderstanding.
Zsolt, we'll leave it there. I hope that was helpful to you. Thank you so much for your call. We have to take a quick break. Jimmy Akin is our guest. Our number is 888-31-TRUTH. And all of Jimmy Akin's books, CDs, DVDs here at Catholic Answers, along with every other book, CD, DVD, and every other product here at Catholic Answers, is on sale right now. 10 to 25% off in most cases, in some cases up to 50% off. And the sale includes even our School of Apologetics courses. Visit shop.catholic.com today and check out the deals.
Hi, this is Trevor Williams from the Pittsburgh Pirates, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Are you prepared to vote?
Citizens have co-responsibility for society. The moral theology tradition teaches that one may not vote for an enemy of religion or of freedom, except to exclude a worse enemy of religion and freedom.
Learn more so you're prepared when you vote this November. Visit EWTN.com/vote for everything Catholic voters need to know before picking up a ballot.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, open forum, 2 hours with Jimmy Akin on a Thursday. That's a delight. We're so glad you're here. Of course, you probably anticipated this. The phones are pretty full. You're welcome to call and keep trying, but at the moment they are full. 888-318-7884 is the number. Let us go now. Where are we going? We're going to Kensington, Missouri. Robert in Kensington, Missouri. You there with us, Robert?
Yes. Yes, sir. I just wanted to mention in the devotional today's a day to remember Pope St. John Paul II.
Oh, thank you so much, Robert.
That's all right. My question is a simple question. All Saints Day and All Souls Day occur so close to each other. What's the difference, and what's the reason for having them so close together? And in a good humor way, how did Halloween sneak in there?
Okay.
All right.
So coming up here on the liturgical calendar, we have a interesting little triduum of days. October 31st is Halloween. November 1st is All Saints Day, and typically November 2nd is All Souls Day. So the pivotal celebration there, and the one that determines the timing of the other two, is the middle one. It's November 1st, which is All Saints Day. And All Saints Day is a day where we commemorate all of the saints who are in heaven. Now, other saints, like, for example, Peter and Paul and John the Baptist and all the others that you're familiar with that have special days on the calendar, have their own day at different times of the year. But there are so many saints that they can't all have their own special day. And so to take care of those saints, of remembering and honoring those saints that don't have their own special day, November 1st was chosen as a day to just commemorate all of the saints, everybody who's in heaven, whether they're canonized or not. If you're in heaven, November 1st is a day where the church commemorates your memory and wants to honor what God did in your life. So it was desired to have a special day to just catch all of the saints, to just commemorate everybody in heaven, whether they're canonized or not, whether they have their own special day elsewhere on the calendar or not. So that's what All Saints Day is about. But it's such an important celebration that it also made sense to have a kind of preliminary celebration. And this is something that we see elsewhere on the liturgical calendar. Important feast days often have a little kind of mini celebration the day before, and especially the evening before. That's why we have Christmas Eve leading into Christmas. And it's also why we have the evening celebration on Holy Saturday leading into Easter Sunday. And you see that elsewhere in the history of the calendar. You'll see an early preliminary celebration of a major feast on the eve of a bigger feast. And that's what Halloween is. Halloween, the name in English, is a contraction of All Hallows Eve. And hallow is simply another word for saint. To say that something is hallowed is another way to say it's sacred or sanctified. That's what we mean when we say the Lord's Prayer and we say, hallowed be thy name. We're asking God to help other people treat his name as sacred or hallowed. And so a saint, a sacred person, is a hallow or a holy person. And so All Saints' Day is the same thing as All Hallows' Day. Just means the same thing. But it's historically an important enough feast that people would have this preliminary celebration on the eve of All Hallows' Day. And so that's where we got All Hallows' Eve or Halloween. Now, in recent centuries, starting in the British Isles, we got a kind of interesting celebration involving pumpkins and ghosts and monster costumes and things like that. That's not universal in the Catholic Church. That's something that really started in the British Isles, so it's more of a local thing, even though with mass media it's now gone more global. But that's different than the religious purpose of All Hallows Eve, which is to get ready spiritually for the celebration of All Saints' Day. But then there's another group of people, the ones who aren't yet in heaven, who are still being purified. And since they're not yet in heaven, they're not yet fully holy, and so they're not yet called saints. They're not fully sanctified yet. Instead, they're in the process of being sanctified, and their souls are experiencing this purification, so they're called the holy souls, and they're in purgatory. And so we also have a day where we pray for them, for the souls that are being purified in purgatory on their way to being in heaven. And that's what All Souls is, All Souls Day. And because it's similar to All Saints Day, in All Saints Day we commemorate those who are in heaven. On All Souls we commemorate those who are on their way to heaven. That's why All Souls Day comes immediately after All Saints Day.
Robert, thanks very much for the question. I want to commend to you. On Monday we have every Monday we have a new episode of Catholic Answers Focus that drops on CatholicAnswersFocus.com. And that one is on All Saints and All Souls Day with Father Hugh Barber. And he kind of goes into some historical stuff and some theological stuff too about the condition of the dead. So you might want to grab that on Monday when it drops on CatholicAnswersFocus.com. Thanks, Robert. Up next, Nate in Dallas, Texas, watching on YouTube. Nate, you're late today.
Hey.
Hi, Nate. How are you?
I apologize.
Come on, man.
I'm well, thanks, and happy birthday to Mrs. Kellett.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice of you, Nate.
I think that she gave us all a very great gift about, 27 years ago.
Yeah, 27. Right? That's exactly right. Exactly, 27 years ago. Go ahead, Nate. What do you got for Jimmy today?
Well, I called on October 1st, and we talked about progressive revelation, and I made a couple of critiques of it. The first one was I think that if you took someone from a few thousand years ago and brought them up today, that they would be capable of learning the morals and the theology. Jimmy suggested that they were actually very different. My counterpoint to that is that Australian Aboriginals have been separated from the rest of the genealogy of humankind for about 100,000 plus years. And they can send their kids off to college. They can integrate. Mm-hmm. Another thing was I brought up that God wasn't averse to commanding the Israelites to do something very, very different from what their surrounding neighbors were doing. So I gave the example of circumcision. Jimmy said, no, they were circumcision before that. And so, yes, I wasn't going to go there, but yes, circumcision did predate what we see in the Bible. But I think that argument from Jimmy actually highlights that progressive revelation is very, very hard to disseminate from natural progression of human thinking. And so if that's the case, like if you are going to make that case, then how would you say we can determine what is, modernism basically versus what is progressive revelation? And
let me just get something clear, Nate. So you're saying that people would have come to these insights that we in the Judeo-Christian tradition we call this revelation, but you're saying people would have come to these insights eventually, morally, I mean?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, I'm suggesting that did happen, in fact.
Okay.
And lastly, the analogy of the Hebrew. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. You just finish. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Instead of circumcision, we could talk about Sabbath instead, and monotheism being different, banning human sacrifice. But onto Hebrew, he said the analogy of teaching somebody morals and theology could be compared to learning Hebrew, and it's really, really hard to learn Hebrew. I don't think that is a fair analogy, because I'm talking about like raising a child from a young age, from infancy all the way until they're a young adult. And just if you were to go with the Hebrew analogy, like someone would grow up learning that as a language, and it would become natural, and they would adopt it. And therefore, I think it's a point in my favor, not a point against me.
Okay, Jimmy?
So I'm not sure I entirely understand all of the things Nate's claiming. He's laid a number of issues on the table there. I'll respond as I can, but then we may need to continue this discussion on a future episode. So Nate's always welcome to call back. In terms of, so you mentioned that Australian Aborigines, okay, so let me refresh a little bit from my memories of our previous conversation. One of the things that came up, and this was not a major point, this was a subsidiary point, is I noted that in the last several thousand years, there is evidence of a selection pressure on the human genome that has apparently been driving up a couple of characteristics. One of them is intelligence, and the other is cooperativeness. And this is cited by some individuals as a reason why we build bigger civilizations now than we used to. We actually are somewhat more intelligent and somewhat more cooperative than our ancestors were a few thousand years ago. And so I don't think it's the case that at least the evidence doesn't suggest that it's the case, that if you took someone from 5,000 years ago and raised them in a modern environment, they would come out exactly like a modern person. They might, and statistically some would, but it's not clear that the statistical average person who's biologically from 5,000 years ago would end up identical to someone today. They might be a little crankier. They might be a little less good at abstract thought. They'd still be recognizably human, and they'd still be very similar to a modern person, but they might not be absolutely the same. In terms of Australian Aborigines having been separate from other branches of the human race for some time, well, that's true, but that doesn't mean that the same selection pressures weren't at work in their population that were at work in other human populations. I mean, one of the key things that's been driving up human intellect is an arms race, because if you have widespread warfare, you need smarts in order to outsmart the enemy and to get your group to survive. And so there's selection pressure due to warfare historically to drive intelligence up. That's why even in the animal world, predator animals are smarter than prey animals, because it takes more smarts to sneak up and eat a prey animal than it does to sneak up and eat a blade of grass. So combat has a tendency to drive up intelligence. Well, there was warfare among the Australian Aborigines in the last 100,000 years, so they would have had the same selection pressure driving intelligence up as other groups. It doesn't tell us anything about what the state of their genome was versus other populations' genomes were 5,000 years ago. Having said that, my comments were, to the extent, and I don't remember specifically invoking Hebrew, but learning Hebrew as an adult is a challenge. Learning it as a child is not. Children naturally pick up whatever language they're exposed to. And Nate is right that if you took a person from 5,000 years ago and raised them in a modern moral environment, that would result in them having broadly modern views and reactions. They might not be identical, but it would be broadly the same. But all that was a subsidiary point. God wasn't raising the Israelites from babies in isolation from ancient Near Eastern ideas and just downloading them modern Christian revelation. He was starting with the people that were adults, even though there were children in the community, but they were adults who were already formed by the ideas that were common in the ancient Near East. And that did serve as a limit on what he was able to teach them. And for his own reasons, now he's omnipotent. He could have directly downloaded all of this into their minds, but he chose not to. He chose to guide them progressively into a greater understanding of him and his will. And that's what we call progressive revelation. Does it have overlaps with what human reason itself would tell you that is discoverable by people in other communities? Absolutely it does. C.S. Lewis has a great book on that called The Abolition of Man, where, among other things, he points out that the same fundamental moral principles are found in all human societies. Now, they're understood in different ways at different times, so that some communities are, for example, more prone to violence than others. But if all Nate's saying is, hey, there's a substantial component of natural law in divine revelation, that's absolutely true.
Thank you, Nate. Appreciate the call. Look forward to talking with you again. Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's open forum. We'll be right back with more questions for Jimmy right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catch Catholic Answers Live anytime at Catholic.com.
If you spend any time on Twitter, Facebook, or mainstream media, you're probably familiar with the litany of slogans that skeptics employ to rescue you from the foolish belief that God exists. The constant onslaught seems to leave people with the idea that they have no alternative but to embrace atheism. How can a Christian respond? In One Less God Than You, John DeRosa breaks down 20 of the most common atheist challenges and shows you how to craft effective answers. Atheism is more aggressive and widespread than ever. Read One Less God Than You and prepare yourself to respond with the joyful truth that God is real. To get your copy of One Less God Than You, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
To many people, even many Christians, purgatory is a fantasy, or worse, a wicked lie invented by the church to make salvation complicated and keep people in fear. But I'm here to tell you that purgatory is fact, not fiction. The Bible supports it, Christians have historically believed in it, and it makes theological sense. In my new book, Purgatory is for Real, I provide the evidence and reasoning to help you understand this controversial doctrine and demonstrate how it's actually a joyful, hopeful reality, not something shadowy and mysterious, but a sign of God's love and mercy. To get your copy of Purgatory is for Real, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Jimmy Akin is our guest. Jimmy is the author of The Bible is a Catholic Book, among many other things, including A Daily Defense, which is a fun one. If you're one of those people like me who just like to have a little snack to read every now and then, you can just open up, read a page, and you will be fully informed on one of 365 plus one different apologetics topics. Jimmy's also the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. What drops tomorrow on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World?
Well, last week we had a show on the French-Canadian mystic Father Michel Rodrigue and his apocalyptic claims and whether they're accurate or not. So that was about the future. This time we're heading into the past, and we're going to be talking about, since it's you may have heard, it's an election season.
What?
And
Really?
some people are not always happy with the presidential candidates. And back in 1857, some people were not happy with newly elected President James Buchanan. And when he came to Washington, D.C. and stayed at the National Hotel, he and his entourage suddenly became violently ill, and his doctor thought it was poison.
Oh, really?
And then when he came back a few months later for the inauguration itself, same thing happened again, and hundreds of people got sick and dozens died. So we're going to be talking about what this mysterious event was. Was it an assassin? Was it a serial killer? Was it accidental poisoning? Was it something else? But we're going to be doing Death at the National Hotel.
Oh, fun. All right. Yeah, Buchanan, widely acclaimed for preceding the Civil War with inaction for so very good, Jimmy. Very good. Be very interesting to hear that. Let's go to.
Oh, and some people said Jesuits were to blame.
It's always Jesuits, Jimmy. It's always well, if it's not aliens, it's mostly aliens. But if it's not aliens, it's Jesuits. I'm sorry to any Jesuits out there. I'm just joking around. Christine is listening on 1260 AM The Rock. The station manager there is Bernadette Boguski, and I always try to say hi to Bernadette because she always tells me how happy she is when I say hi to her when people call from Cleveland, Ohio. So hi, Bernadette. Christine, I can't stop now. Christine, your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy.
Do you think the triumph of the Immaculate Heart promised at Fatima has happened already, or is it yet to come? I believe Mary said Russia would be converted and a period of peace would be granted to the world. And I assume Russia's conversion was the fall of the USSR after Pope John Paul consecrated it in the 80s. It seemed like the period of peace would have followed in its wake. Are we already experiencing an era of relative peace? Because I believe Pope Benedict prayed it would arrive soon, so I assume he thinks it's still to come.
Well, I'd have to see what Pope Benedict said in that regard. That's a quotation I'm not aware of. We're dealing here, I should point out, with a matter of private revelation. So this is not a matter of church teaching. This is something that Catholics may legitimately have different opinions on. I can tell you mine, but, just for what it's worth, it's my opinion. It happens to seem to correspond both with elements of what you said and elements of what John Paul II and Joseph Ratzinger and Sister Lucy of Fatima herself said. They all three interpreted the conversion of Russia as the fall of the Soviet Union, and that led to it stopping its spreading its errors throughout the nations and destabilizing the world political scene for a time, and that resulted in the end of the Cold War and thus the end of the proxy wars that were also part of the Cold War, like the Vietnamese War, the Korean War, and the Afghan War that the Soviet Union had with Afghanistan. All of those were proxy wars, and there were others as well, but those are some familiar ones. And so with the end of the Cold War and the end of those proxy wars, a period of peace was given to the world. That changed, though, with September 11th in the year 2001. A new era of war began. And so my personal opinion is that Russia was converted, the period of peace did happen, and unfortunately we're now past that period of peace. And fortunately, we also seem to be past that major conflict as well. Presumably there will be other conflicts in the future, but I'm glad we are living in a period of peace right now. If you'd like to learn more about that, including more about what Sister Lucy had to say, check out episodes 40, 64, and 65 of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, where I cover Fatima and the Third Secret in particular. And I include material from interviews with Sister Lucy, where she laid out a lot of what I just said.
Christine, thank you. Appreciate that call. Let's go now to Michael in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, watching on YouTube. Hi, Michael. You got a question for Jimmy?
Yes. Hey, thank you so much for taking my call.
Happy to.
I was born and raised a Catholic, baptized, confirmed, altar boy, etc., but left the church and later in life became kind of more in line with the born-again evangelical, and I really fell in love with the music. Since then, I've come back to the Catholic Church and consider myself a Catholic again, and I'm wondering if it's okay for me to still listen to the music from the more evangelical born-again movement. And I'm asking because I've watched some YouTube videos on how some of the leaders of these evangelical churches that have worship bands are actually kind of heretical in what they preach. And now I'm kind of concerned about listening to the worship music that comes from these churches as a Catholic.
Well, I think that that the answer is going to depend on who you are as a person and where you are in your spiritual journey. If you're firm in your Catholic faith and you're able to, recognize false teaching when you hear it and put it aside, then there's no problem in consuming music coming from a different perspective or any other kind of media coming from a different perspective. I mean, let's suppose I wanted to learn about mathematics, and the guy, and I have a mathematics textbook, but I happen to know the guy who wrote it is an atheist. In fact, I have a book like that. Back when I was taking philosophical logic, one of my professors thought I had so much promise, he gave me a book that was an introduction to mathematical logic by a British philosopher named A.C. Grayling. And I happen to know that A.C. Grayling is an atheist. But that wouldn't stop me from reading his book in order to learn this subject. I can, if he happens to bring up some of his ideas from atheism in his textbook on mathematical logic, well, fine. I'm not an atheist. I recognize that, and I'll even critique his position for him. But, that won't stop me from being able to learn about the subject by reading his book, because I'm secure in my faith and I can exercise critical thinking to set aside and critique erroneous ideas. Well, the same thing is true with anything else. Your goal may not be to learn, but simply to experience, entertainment. I might watch a movie by someone, even though the filmmaker has a different religion than I do. Or I might listen to worship music and have music that would help me grow closer to God, even though the person who's performing the music or who wrote the music might not be a full-blown Orthodox Catholic. As long as I'm secure in my faith, and as long as I can critique and set aside problematic elements, there's not a fundamental problem. And personally, I sometimes do listen to music that's made by evangelical artists. A lot of Christian music, whether it's evangelical or Catholic, is not so great. But there are good people who are good musicians and good composers in both communities. I personally think a lot of the evangelical composers Mark Hurd and Billy Sprague. And even though they are Protestant and both evangelicals, their music has an awareness of the interaction between suffering and hope that actually strikes me as very Catholic in its sensibilities.
Michael, what do you think? Is that helpful to you?
That's fantastic, because I'm a musician, and I find that this music really has kind of gotten me closer to my faith, and it ended up actually leading me back to the Catholic Church. But when I found out the preachers were really not teaching biblical stuff, it kind of made me worry. But this Jimmy's response has really clarified a lot for me.
Great, Michael. Thanks.
Awesome.
I'm very, very, very glad you called then. We got to take a quick break. Before we do take the quick break, I want to remind you that October's free ebook is Demons, Deliverance, and Discernment. If you're interested in that book, if you'd like to get it, you just go to shop.catholic.com and you look for the button at the top of the page, and then they'll give you instructions on how to download your free ebook, Demons, Deliverance, and Discernment.
Call us now with your question on Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
He is honored by the Church as a saint with the title of the Angelic Doctor.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Thomas Aquinas wrote a basic textbook for young theology students that became the Church's most famous guide to the faith, the Summa Theologica. It helped him earn the title Doctor of the Church. He died in 1274.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
You've heard that St. Paul Street Evangelization supports hundreds of teams of evangelists sharing the good news. But did you know that some of these teams are public prayer stations? Set up a sign on the sidewalk and offer prayer and encouragement to those you encounter. Everyone needs prayer. Try this new method of witnessing to Jesus. Contact St. Paul Street Evangelization to get started at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, and enjoying a Thursday afternoon with Jimmy Akin. 2 hours with Jimmy Akin today, and it's all open forum. Whether you're Catholic or not, you're welcome to call. Whether you're Christian or not, you're welcome to call. 888-318-7884. Next call comes from Canada. Anonymous caller from Canada, watching on Catholic.com. Anonymous, go ahead. Your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Jimmy. I've been speaking with someone who's considering becoming Catholic, but in their current kind of state, they're not comfortable with Marian devotions, not comfortable in participating with them. They're willing to consider assenting to what the church's believes, like the church's teachings, but certain Marian devotions, and really most of them, they really have a challenge with. And so given this, assuming they get to the point where they're willing to assent, but still struggle with the devotions, would they still be able to become Catholic? And if they were, and then if they were to become Catholic, if they were assigned a Marian devotion, like a Hail Mary or something, as a penance, or if a priest told them, I really think you should come to this Marian devotion thing, and actually you really need to, would they be required to do that in either of those two cases?
Well, okay, so first of all, let's distinguish, let's go back to Cardinal Newman from the 19th century, who famously made a distinction between a doubt and a difficulty. The way he used the term doubt, he meant where you are unwilling to assent to something. Either you believe it's false or you're not willing to make a judgment one way or another. That's what he considered a doubt. And he distinguished that from a difficulty. A difficulty would be a lack of confidence or a feeling of tension regarding something. But the doubt is an action of the will, because you're either assenting to something or you're not. You're either believing or doubting. On the other hand, a difficulty is a feeling. It's a feeling of, lack of confidence or tension or something like that. These, as he pointed out, are two different things. And one can assent to everything the church teaches, but still have difficulties. You can still have, not feel the level of confidence you'd like, or feel some tension over it, but say, well, the church teaches it. I accept it's true. So if your friend acknowledges that in principle it's legitimate to honor former Christians who are saints, and to show respect for them in various ways, and ask for their intercession and things like that. As long as the principles are accepted, that's fine. The person can go ahead and be Catholic. You don't have to have any particular comfort level as a Catholic. If the person has due to their personal history, they don't, at least presently, feel comfortable with saying a Marian devotion, well, they don't have to. Marian devotions are optional. They are not something that the church teaches you must participate in. Now, in a practical situation, might a priest say to a person in confession, well, I want you to say an Our Father and 3 Hail Marys. I would, because Hail Marys are commonly said by Catholics, well, I would, if I was in that position, say, I'm sorry, Father, I'm a new convert and I'm not yet comfortable saying Marian prayers. Could I say 4 Our Fathers instead? And the priest almost certainly would say, of course, my child, don't worry about it. Priests are understanding of new converts and the sensibilities that they have that continue from their former, upbringing. And I understand this myself. When I was in the process of becoming Catholic, this was an issue for me. I'd already accepted, Catholic teaching in principle, but I didn't yet feel comfortable participating in Marian devotions or asking the saints for their intercession. That later changed. The more, as I got used to the principles, I got used to putting them in practice. And so it was no longer a problem for me to say Marian prayers or ask the other saints for their intercession. In fact, I would frequently do that. But, it's something that took a little time to get comfortable with, and that's fine.
Anonymous, I hope that was helpful to you. Thank you so much. Appreciate the call. It's Open Forum with Jimmy Akin. As it happens, that's generally a very busy day, and it is a busy day today. So we will keep moving and try to get to as many as we can. We go now to New Jersey. Anonymous caller watching on YouTube in New Jersey. Anonymous, you there with us?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Anonymous.
Hi. Hi. So I'm a scrupulous Catholic. I'm fairly certain I have OCD. And there's been something that's kind of been troubling me for a while. So I've noticed some church documents say that criticize the exaltation and glorification of violence in media. I was wondering does that mean there's a sin in, say, enjoying action movies or film and or combat in video games? And as someone who wants to work in entertainment media, is there also a moral problem with, wanting to work in projects that involve these?
Okay. So first of all, you said church documents that deal with the glorification or exhortation of violence in the media, correct?
I think it says mass media or...
Yeah, but we're talking
media,
MEDIA, right? The media.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to verify, because when I first saw the question as it was call screened, it says exaltation of violence in Medea, MEDEA. And I was going, wow, our Anonymous is really well educated to know about Euripides' play Medea, which does indeed involve violence because the title character kills her kids at the end and then gets off scot-free because she's part divine. And however, I was not aware of any magisterial documents that deal with Medea. And so I kind of guessed it was going to be about the media. So, but either way, I was curious. It is possible to glorify violence. And when that happens, it's wrong. Violence is not something to be glorified. On the other hand, not all depictions of violence are wrong. There can be depictions of violence, for example, that are very sobering. I remember watching, I think it was Treasure of the Sierra Madre with Humphrey Bogart, and there's a scene where Humphrey Bogart and the other main actor, who I'm forgetting at the moment, beat up a guy in a bar, and it's like, wow, that is a really realistic bar fight, and it is not at all celebrating what's happening here. This is brutal. And it has a sobering, edifying effect. We read about violence in the Bible. There is not even anything wrong with appreciating the use of justified force for a good cause. In the Psalms, for example, we have the psalmist celebrating the fact that by strength given from the Lord, his arms are able to bend a bow of bronze, and he's able to scale a wall and do other things that a soldier needs to do. And there's nothing wrong with appreciating success in battle in a good cause. It was regrettable in World War II that the Nazis, among others, invaded other nations and had to be beaten back. But there's nothing wrong with watching a war movie from World War II and see the Allies obtaining victory and going, "Go Allies!" That's perfectly legitimate. That's a natural human response, even though it's regrettable that this had to be done. One can appreciate what it is that's being done in the service of good. And so it's not in principle wrong to either include depictions of the use of force in literature or in games or in movies. It's not in principle wrong to appreciate or to that extent celebrate the use of the successful use of force in a good cause. But there does come a point where it's possible to glorify the violence itself, and that's particularly the case when it becomes detached from its moral context. So you're not celebrating victory over, let's say, Nazis, but you're celebrating dropping bombs on unarmed civilians, Well, at that point, it's lost its moral framework, and you're glorifying violence, and you're actually glorifying an evil application of violence. So there is a line to be wary of, but it's not in principle wrong to consume media like the Bible that contains violence. It's not wrong to appreciate its legitimate use of force. It is wrong to celebrate the illegitimate use of force. And if it's not wrong to consume media under those conditions, it's not wrong to generate media under those conditions, to tell news stories about knights rescuing villages from oppressors. And so, well, that's the Seven Samurai. But it's not wrong to create new stories or new games or new movies that involve the legitimate use of force. In fact, there has to be something at stake for there to be dramatic tension at all. And you might, Anonymous, want to do some Googling about things I've written about fiction and horror and the biological basis and why God built those into us, for further information on all that. In terms of your own situation, suffering from scrupulosity, it's something that makes it more delicate. But in principle, there's nothing wrong here. And a standard piece of advice for individuals who do suffer from OCD is don't run away from your OCD. Don't run away from your triggers, because it will only strengthen them.
Anonymous, I hope that that's helpful to you. The Seven Samurai, that did get remade as the Magnificent Seven.
Magnificent Seven and the Magnificent Warriors and the Magnificent Ferengi, and it's been remade many times in many genres.
And Patrick on Facebook says it was Walter Houston.
Walter Houston. I was thinking it might have been James Houston, but Walter Houston. Thank you.
Anonymous, thanks. God bless you. Call back again whenever you got another question. We're happy to help if we can. We're going to go to Deanna now in Somerset, Pennsylvania, watching on YouTube. Deanna, thank you for your call. Your question for Jimmy.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Happy to.
So, my father-in-law had told me, he travels back and forth to Myrtle Beach, and he had said that the priest at the church down there said that wearing a mask, we should consider that penance, and that's equivalent to praying for those in purgatory. So I was just trying to get more clarification on this, because I never heard that before.
Well, I didn't hear what the priest said, so I can only speculate. But if I were to speculate, I would say, well, this is probably something the priest was saying to people who weren't happy about wearing masks. There may be local requirements in the area that if you're going to go to a worship service and be around other people, you may need to wear a mask right now. And a lot of people don't like that, but it's better to have the people going to the worship service, going to mass, even if it means wearing a mask. And so what should we as people who want to go to mass make out of that? Well, if you find it a burden to wear a mask, then you can do what you would do with any other situation and say, well, and so-called offer it up. In other words, bear the burden and say, God, if I'm pleasing you with how I'm bearing this burden, please help other people, maybe me, maybe others I know, maybe people in purgatory. And that's essentially what it means to offer something up. You bear a burden that you otherwise wouldn't want to have, but say, okay, I'm going to accept this burden, and I ask that if this pleases God, that He bless somebody, either me or other people here on earth or someone in purgatory. And so that's what offering it up means. And it sounds like this priest was just saying, look, if you don't like wearing a mask, I understand, but offer it up and something constructive can come out of it.
What do you think, Deanna?
That sounds reasonable to me.
All right. I think it is reasonable. Awesome. Jimmy Akin is our guest, and lines remain full. You'll have one line when we go to the break shortly, and you can give it a try, 888-318-7884. It's open forum, so you can ask Jimmy about anything you want. Jimmy is the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, and it's going to be about... I don't know what it's about. Either someone tried to murder James Buchanan, or there was some kind of terrible accident, or something got in the water, but that's why you have to watch it, and it drops tomorrow.
Yeah. One way or another, death at the National Hotel.
But not for Buchanan, though. He survived it, right?
He survived.
Yeah. Jimmy Akin is our guest. He's also the author of Most recently, a book called The Bible is a Catholic Book. He's the author of The Fathers Know Best, The Drama of Salvation, a whole bunch of other things. You can also find him at jimmyakin.com. If you want our free ebook, you can go get it right now during the break. Just head over to shop.catholic.com, click on the free ebook button, and get Demons, Deliverance, and Discernment for your reading pleasure. Just don't read it too late at night. We'll be right back with more questions for Jimmy on this open forum on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Jimmy Akin is our guest. Jimmy, the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, which has taken over the internet, and also the senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, author extraordinaire, and blogger, and I even saw him on The Journey Home one time. Like you can find Jimmy all over the place. But Jimmy, I just got this on my desk from Carrie. This beautiful little 3 CD set called The Mysteries of Fatima. Did it just come out?
Point.
What's that?
Am I mic'd up at this point?
Oh, yeah, you are. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I guess that just came out, and that's actually edited from Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. We've talked about Fatima in depth on the show, and this is a collection of what we had to say.
Yeah, I remember learning from you about the stuff that happened before, like the angel and all that stuff that doesn't often get talked about.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of documentation, and Fatima is an apparition that I've done a lot of personal research into. And there's a bunch of fascinating stuff, both from the early days that a lot of folks may not be aware of, and from later days. Like Sister Lucy gave some interviews late in life that gave her perspective on it, but it's very hard to find those interviews in English, but I did.
Oh, very cool. So the Mysteries of Fatima, a 3D set available now from Jimmy Akin. 888-318-7884 is our number here. Open forum means open to everyone and open to anything. When Jimmy's on, we really mean open to anything. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you right now, you make Jimmy happy if every now and then we get a science question. I'm just saying that. I mean, you don't have to, but every now and then if somebody throws one in, that'll be good. Let's go to Dallas. Jason in Dallas watching on YouTube. You are first up this hour. Jason, your question for Jimmy Akin.
I have a question about particle acceleration.
Okay.
Right. No.
What tera electron volt range?
I have kind of a general question, and I'll put a specific spin to it, and that is, I'm looking to get some guidance on when to talk with my kids. I have young children about nuanced Catholic issues. And the example I'll give you is recently we had a blessing of the pets for the Feast of St. Francis Assisi at my kids' Catholic school. And that brought to mind several pets that had died. And so when the pets die, we make comments, they ask if they're looking down at us from heaven, et cetera. And my understanding, although it's nuanced, has always been not really, because animals don't have souls, they don't go to heaven. Now, so I guess my question is, can you give me some guidance on maybe even when to start addressing those sort of nuanced issues with kids?
Okay. So I'll do what I can. I'm afraid I don't know how much it'll affect the overall answer, but I mean, I don't have kids myself, unfortunately. I wanted a bunch of kids, but my wife died before we had any, and so unfortunately I don't have practical experience raising kids, but I can articulate some principles. The answer fundamentally is going to depend from one child to another. It's going to depend on the age of the child, but what it really depends on is that child's ability to understand and assimilate in a constructive way the information that you're giving to the child. And that will vary dramatically from one child to another. Some children will be secure in their faith and able to constructively assimilate things that might be distressing much better than other children, even though they're exactly the same age. Now, the child needs, because this is the goal of parenthood, the child needs to be prepared to become a successful, functional adult. And that means that at some point before they become an adult, they need to have what they need. They need to know what they will need to know as an adult. So one cannot shield children from unpleasant realities forever. There does come a point where the risk of withholding the information is greater than it will lead to greater harm than disclosing it, even in an imperfect situation. So one should always not focus on the immediate comfort level of the child, but on getting the child to where they need to be as a functional Catholic adult. So that's kind of the overarching principle. In terms of how to approach specific issues, it's going to depend on the issue. I think this one, though, of what happens with pets is an instructive one. Because in approaching any issue that could be potentially distressing for someone, we want to make sure that we understand it thoroughly. And this is a good illustration of that. Actually, the historic opinion among Catholic theologians is that animals do have souls, that everything that is alive has a soul. So plants have souls, animals have souls, human beings have souls, but we have different kinds of souls that allow us to do different things. And plants have what are called, according to the standard view, have vegetative souls that allow them to grow and metabolize and reproduce and things like that. Animals have what are called sensitive souls that, in addition to allowing them to grow and reproduce, they also allow them to sense things. That's why they're called sensitive, and even to engage in a kind of primitive form of reasoning. Human beings, though, have the gift of rational thought, so we have what are called rational souls that allow us to grow and reproduce and sense and reason in a human way. Now, according to the standard or most common historical opinion among theologians, it requires a special type of soul, namely a rational soul, to survive death without a body. And so the historically common opinion has been that only human beings survive death, that animals and plants don't. But you know what? That's an opinion that's derived from philosophical arguments. It is not church teaching. And consequently, it's only a matter of opinion. And whether you buy it or not depends on whether you accept the philosophical premises that are involved in it. Obviously, I can't go into those in depth at the moment, but to keep things at kind of top level, there have been ways of talking to younger children about pets in heaven, and like if they start to question, are they really there? And they find the thought distressing that they might not be there, well, it would certainly be true to tell the child, well, if you need your pets in heaven, they'll be there. Because God's going to make sure you have everything you need to be happy in heaven. So if you really in heaven need those pets, you'll have them. Now, most theologians historically would say you won't need them. You'll be so happy to have God, you won't be sad about your pet not being there. But that would still be a truth, albeit a partial truth, that you could tell to a child at this kind of transitional stage. But I think it's also legitimate to tell children, we don't know, because this isn't a matter of church teaching. At some point, I would certainly be honest with the child and say, well, here's the historically most common opinion, but it's not church teaching. It's based on certain philosophical premises that the church does not mandate, and so it's just an opinion. And you can be open on this question. So I wouldn't try to lock it in and tell the child one way or another what they need to think. I mean, I might tell them my opinion if I have a strong opinion, but it's not a matter of church teaching, and I wouldn't mandate that they hold a particular view.
Jason, thank you. I hope that that's helpful to you. We have to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Open Forum with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
There's all kinds of prayers. There's all kinds of ways of praying. There's all kinds of methods of praying. There's a Salesian method, and Francis de Sales, and Ignatius of Loyola. There's Franciscan methods and Dominican methods, and you name it, we got it. But sometimes we depend on a method too much. St. Teresa said that prayer was conversation with God. Do you have a hard time conversing with people? No, I don't have a hard time. Well, that's how it is with God.
store-wide sale is on right now at shop.catholic.com. 10 to 15% off, 10 to 25% off, as a matter of fact, on almost everything. Some things up to 50% off. And the sale includes the courses in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics. Just go to shop.catholic.com to find all the deals. Jimmy Akin is our guest. Up next in Saginaw, Michigan, is Richard, listening on Ave Maria Radio, 1440 AM. Richard, thank you so much for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, gentlemen. First, I want to say I really enjoy your counsel, and I'm looking forward to getting the Bible as a Catholic book. As an older Catholic, I through listening to your show, the term doctors of the church, I'm ashamed to say I never even heard of that until a few years ago in listening to your program. And my question is, basically, who are the doctors of the church? You know, how many, and specifically, how did one become a doctor of the church, and what is their role as the doctrine or a doctor of our faith?
Okay, so the term doctor it comes from Latin, and it means teacher. So a doctor of the church is a teacher of the church. And what that means is a doctor is an individual who has taught in an especially useful and insightful way. And thus, their teaching is worthy of being considered by everybody in the whole church. That's why they're a doctor of the church. They've made some valuable contribution in terms of teaching the faith that the Holy See has, and specifically the Pope, has decided is worth being held up as an example of this is really valuable, what this person did. Either the ideas that they proposed are really valuable, or they expressed the ideas in a really clear and effective way, and this is a model that should be held up to other people to emulate and to learn from. And so over the course of time, the popes have designated various individuals as doctors of the church. Originally, there were just four. It was Augustine, Jerome, Ambrose, and one of the Gregories, one of the Eastern Gregories. Over the course of time, more have been named. Today, there's going on 40 of them. And so we've had about a tenfold expansion in the number of doctors. They come from different historical ages. They come from different parts of the world. There are both men and women who are doctors. But what they all have in common is they all have taught the faith, or even just done theological speculation in a way that has been very helpful and has made a real contribution, and the popes want to recognize that and hold them up as examples. Some recent examples, or some examples, include St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Gregory of Narek, St. Hildegard of Bingen, St. Therese of Lisieux. In terms of how one gets named a doctor, it's ultimately up to the Pope. I mean, the Pope could wake up tomorrow and say, oh, I want to name somebody a doctor of the church. But practically, there's actually a process that is used for this. First of all, the doctor has to be dead so that they're not going to go off the rails teaching something new and problematic that's going to spoil the example they set. Number two, they need to be a saint. And so they're already worthy of holding up as an example of holiness, not just of teaching, but of holiness. And then typically proposals will get made about maybe this person would be a good doctor of the church. And I think it's the Congregation for the Causes of Saints that examines that. But they actually have a list of people at any given time of historical figures that they're considering naming as doctors of the church, and they do a review of the person's life and teachings and say, what were their distinct contributions, how really good what were they as an example of a teacher, and then recommendations get made to the Pope about, we think this person is appropriate. And if the Pope agrees, he goes ahead and proclaims the person a doctor of the church and holds them up as an example.
And Richard, you mentioned that you wanted to get Jimmy's book, The Bible is a Catholic Book. We'd love to send you a free copy of that because we really appreciate your call and your kind words about Jimmy. And if you stay on the line, Annie, who's operating the phones today, will get your address and we'll send you a free copy of The Bible is a Catholic Book. Our number here is 888-318-7884. Jimmy Akin is our guest. And up next, we go to Aiken, South Carolina, where Marilyn is listening on 91.1 FM St. Paul Radio. Marilyn, happy to have you. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yes, it's so good to be on, and good afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you for all the information I received by listening. My question is about bilocation. I've read about St. Padre Pio of Pietrelcina bilocated during his life, and I just read about Our Lady of the Pillar. While our Blessed Mother was in Jerusalem, she went to Spain to help St. James, who had difficulty spreading the gospel. My question, are there other saints known to have bilocated, or was this as rare as having the stigmata?
There are other reports of bilocation in Christian history, and so for people who may not be familiar, because it is a little bit of an unfamiliar concept, we should probably take a moment to talk about what bilocation is. As the roots of the word would suggest, bilocation would mean being in more than one place at a time, specifically being in two places. That's like why a bicycle has two wheels, two cycles. Well, bilocation is being in two locations. And that it's reported to manifest in different ways sometimes, and it's also reported across multiple different fields. Sometimes it's reported in the cases of Christian saints or mystics. Sometimes it's reported in the case of non-Christian religious figures, and sometimes it's reported in the case of psychic phenomena. So there's kind of a range of where reports of bilocation come from, and it can manifest and be understood in different ways. In some cases, a person will be physically located in one location, but then their viewpoint will be somewhere else. So if I'm physically sitting in San Diego, California, if I mentally my viewpoint changes to, let's say, being in London, well, that's one kind of phenomenon that gets reported as bilocation. A step up from that is not just where a person's viewpoint is located elsewhere, but where someone else senses them there. Someone else, if my viewpoint is in London, someone might feel that I'm there, even though they can't see me. Or they might see me. They might have a vision that I'm there, even though they don't see me with their physical eyes. Or they might see me with their physical eyes. If I've somehow mystically manifesting as what St. Thomas Aquinas would call an aerial body, which is a kind of temporary physical form that can be assumed. Some have even gone further and proposed somehow God could make my body present in both places in the full physical sense, although Aquinas doesn't go that far. He doesn't think that's possible. But others, based on more recent physics, where space and time are not absolutes but can be folded, you could have a body appearing in the full physical way in two places at once. So there's a range of different types of bilocation and how it might work, and there's a range of different areas from which reports of bilocation come. Padre Pio was one individual who was reported as bilocating. There have been others. It's not a particularly common phenomenon, but it's not particularly rare either. It does get talked about in Catholic mystical literature and outside of Catholic mystical literature. So it's something that I haven't done a ton of research on yet, but I actually plan to do a good bit more research on it and deal with it in an episode of Mysterious World in the future.
Okay, Marilyn.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate the call. Let us go now to Anthony in Geneva, Ohio, watching on YouTube Live. Anthony, thanks for waiting. Your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hi, guys. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you, Anthony.
Hi. I just had a question. So I'm, not to make it about myself, but I'm just a average guy. I was born and baptized Catholic. I've always believed in the faith, never strayed away from it in the sense of not believing in it. But I've obviously never also been completely devout.
Okay.
And I'd like to ask just some resources or books or whatever you can offer. One, how can I be a better Catholic? And then two, more specifically, how to be a better Catholic man.
Okay, Anthony, thank you.
So in regard to the first question, how to be a better Catholic, I can recommend lots of stuff on that. Reading the Catechism of the Catholic Church is a good start, although it's a big book, so it can be a little intimidating. There's a smaller version of it written in Q&A format called the Compendium of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And if the Catechism itself is a little intimidating, you might read that. Also, reading the Bible is a great thing, but the Bible is even bigger than the Catechism and also can be a little intimidating, especially for someone who's newly digging into this kind of material. So you might consider my book, The Bible is a Catholic Book, as a kind of short, easy introduction to help get you familiar with the Bible and what's inside of it. There are a lot of other things. I actually have a book that's just about to come out, I'm told, in the next 2 weeks, called The Words of Eternal Life, that is about growing closer to God and why the faith, what evidence we have for the faith, and how to live the faith and grow as a Christian. There are a lot of other practical helps that are available. I'd suggest checking out Catholic.com and looking at the resources we have there. Then in terms of growing as a Catholic man, I personally may not have as much help. A lot of Catholic man and self-help books tend to focus on like being a good husband and father. And since I'm a widower and we weren't able to have children before my wife died, that's not really part of my life at the moment. But there are, books on being a Catholic husband and father. There are Catholic groups online, like there's a Catholic Man Society and things like that. There are a variety of things. I would just Google Catholic Man and see the different resources that come up and pick from among some of those and explore them.
Anthony, since Jimmy mentioned his 2 books, I'd like to send you a copy of The Bible is a Catholic Book, and that might get you started reading the Bible. That's okay? Oh, you were looking at me like it's not okay. Okay. And then the other book Jimmy said is going to come out in a couple weeks. So maybe if you, you know what, I'll just invite you to call back on the show in a couple weeks and we'll get you a copy of that book. Okay, Anthony, can you hang on and we'll get your address and send you The Bible's a Catholic Book now?
Yeah, sure. That'd be great.
Okay. And then call back in a couple weeks because that other book that's just coming out, it sounds like just the kind of thing that would be very helpful in your situation. So I'd love to get that to you as well. Hang on, Anthony, and Annie will get your address and we'll send that to you. Let's go now to Teague in Permella, Texas, watching on YouTube. Teague, thank you so much for waiting. Your question for Jimmy.
Sure. So my question was about the idea of ipsum esse, God being existence itself, really how we get to that conclusion and what the implications and what it really means that God is existence itself.
Okay. This is something that comes to us from medieval philosophy and theology. It ultimately goes back to a distinction from the Greek philosophers that was made between existence and essence. Essence tells you what something is, and then if it exists, that tells you if it exists. So you could have a particular essence like a unicorn, a horse with one horn, and you can say, well, I understand the essence of a unicorn, but no unicorns exist. And so that shows us the difference between an essence, which is something that could exist, and then the idea of existence, which gives reality to a particular essence. Now, in all of the different things we encounter in the ordinary world, there is clearly a distinction between their essence and their existence if we parse using these categories. Because the essence of me, Jimmy Akin, Jimmy Akin, don't have to exist. There was a time before I existed. And so consequently, I don't have to exist. But based on various ideas that are a little complex to go into on the show, it was reasoned that God is so fundamental that his essence and existence are the same. And consequently, he cannot fail to exist. He's the absolutely necessary thing that grounds all the rest of reality. There's more that can be said on that, but it gets a little complex, and we're on the break, so I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there, but I hope that helps as a sketch.
Thanks, Teague. We'll be right back with more Jimmy Akin, Open Forum, Catholic Answers Live.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
Bishop Joseph Strickland of Tyler, Texas, is one of the most courageous leaders in the church, known for his outspoken support of unborn life, Orthodox faith and morals, and reforming Catholic institutions. In his groundbreaking new book, Light and Leaven, he offers a forthright perspective on the state of the church today and calls on the lay faithful to meet its challenges boldly. Touching on topics including parish renewal, the centrality of the Eucharist, the need for prayer and silence in a noisy and distracted age, and the battle between good and evil in the church and world, Bishop Strickland's wise insights and evident love for souls will inspire and edify you. To order your copy of Light and Leaven, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
To many people, even many Christians, purgatory is a fantasy, or worse, a wicked lie invented by the church to make salvation complicated and keep people in fear. But I'm here to tell you that purgatory is fact, not fiction. The Bible supports it, Christians have historically believed in it, and it makes theological sense. In my new book, Purgatory is for Real, I provide the evidence and reasoning to help you understand this controversial doctrine and demonstrate how it's actually a joyful, hopeful reality, not something shadowy and mysterious, but a sign of God's love and mercy. To get your copy of Purgatory is for Real, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Eric, sitting in for Nick, did not neglect the groovy music. Thanks, Eric. Thanks very much. I wasn't going to say anything because I thought Eric's got enough on his plate with Darren and Nick out. And look at that. You came through with the groovy music. Thanks, Eric. That was very groovy. Yeah, he's all right. Okay. We always enjoy that when Jimmy's here. I associate it with Jimmy on Thursdays now because we've been doing it with Jimmy for so long. And that was fun. Thank you very much. I always like the groovy music. It's Open Forum. Jimmy's our guest. Next we go to Omaha, Nebraska. Story is listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Story, you there with us?
Yeah.
Hello, Story. How old are you?
I'm 6.
Well, thank you very much for your call. What is your question for Mr. Akin?
My question was, since heaven is so great, if you died and went to heaven and then, your family weren't Christian or Catholic and then they died, would they, since heaven is so great, would you see them in heaven even if they didn't go to heaven?
Oh, well, okay. So you'd certainly be able to remember them and all the good things about them, but God is a God of truth, and so I don't think that he would make you think that they were in heaven if they weren't. That wouldn't be truthful of God. And so if they weren't in heaven, God wouldn't pretend that they were. You'd still be happy in heaven, but God would be truthful with you about that fact. On the other hand, the mere fact that they weren't Catholic or even Christian in their lives doesn't mean that they won't be in heaven. Now, God wants everybody to be Catholic, and he wants, and that's the easiest and the best way to get to heaven. But the church teaches that God gives his grace to every person so that every person has a chance to go to heaven. And so even if your relatives weren't Catholic or weren't Christian during their lives, God still will give them his grace to make it possible for them to go to heaven. And so consequently, we can hope that they will go to heaven no matter what happened during their lives.
Okay, Story?
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. You did a really good job asking your question. I really appreciate your call.
Very sophisticated question, too.
I know. I thought it was going one way, and then it got, wow, that's deep. Story, you're all right, and you're always welcome to call here. I hope you will call again. Let us go now to Stockholm, Sweden. Irvin in Stockholm, Sweden, listening on the station of the Cross Radio, must be listening on the app because I don't think the signal goes all the way over there, but maybe it does. Irvin, you there with us?
Yeah, hi. It is the app.
Well, we're very happy to have you.
The question I had, I was wondering about the Catechism of the Catholic Church. I heard somebody ask a question earlier, and I have been thinking about buying it, but I've seen a green book, a red one, and a black one, and I'm not sure which one to pick. What's the difference, or what I should be thinking about the different criteria of which one I should be thinking of?
Okay. Well, the editions of the Catechism of the Catholic Church vary in one of three ways. The first way is the obvious way that they're translated into different languages, and there tends to only be one translation into each language. So you don't have to worry about, is this the better Swedish translation or the worse Swedish translation? If there's a Swedish translation, that's the one there is. Same thing with English. There are not multiple English versions. There's just one English version. So in terms of that variable, you just pick the language edition you want and go with that one. A second variable is what additional aids are there in the catechism? And this varies a little bit from one edition to another. Some editions will contain the preface, or as a preface, they will contain the apostolic constitution that John Paul II wrote to promulgate the catechism, which isn't part of the catechism itself, but is often printed with the catechism. Some editions will have an extra scripture index or an extra index of church authors. Some editions will have a glossary. I don't know about in other languages, but I know some English editions have a glossary that was written by Cardinal William Levada, who was later head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. And the glossary explains some of the terms that are used in the catechism, but it's pretty minimal in terms of this variable, specifically which additional little add-ons does it have. It's like, do we have the apostolic constitution? Do we have the glossary? Do we have some indexes? The real variable is the bigger one, other than language, is the addition, because the catechism has been updated a few times. There was an original 1992 edition, which then had some fairly minimal updates in the late 1990s, and it's been updated a couple of times since with regard to the church expressing its teaching on the death penalty. But those are the only substantive differences in the catechism. Even if you get the original version, it's not going to be very different. The differences affect just a few passages. And other than that, there are things like spelling and typos. But I would say pick the language you want and then pick the most recent edition that you can find, so it'll be more up to date, even though the differences are minor. And then beyond that, take a look for which, does it have any special add-ons that you'd like an extra apostolic constitution or an extra glossary.
Okay, Irvin?
Cool, sounds good. Thanks.
All right. It's kind of cool the way a Swedish guy says the word cool, huh? Yeah, I like that.
It's pretty cool in Sweden, too.
Yeah, well, that's true, especially right now. It's the middle of the night in Sweden. I didn't want to bother Irvin about that, but he's up late. He doesn't have a bedtime. Angelo in Burton, Michigan, watching on YouTube is next. Angelo, thanks for joining us. Your question for Jimmy.
Hello. I recently read the book of Genesis, and it seems to be the consensus amongst many Christians that the book is metaphorical, or a lot of it's symbolism. But why is the book so specific? And I don't know if this is a church teaching or not, but why is the book so specific? If it's metaphors or if it's symbolic?
Okay, so the book of Genesis is not all the same from the beginning to the end. It contains material that is historical, but it was written significantly after the events that it records, and it was written quite a bit after the earliest events it records. So the earlier in Genesis you go, the farther back in time you're going, and therefore the author at the time Genesis was written has less information about specifically how did history unfold in those very early times. And consequently, because of the way ancient literature worked, they didn't write it like a modern history. In a modern history of the ancient world, like let's say that's talking about how the earth formed, you're going to have certainly if it's a scholarly one, it's going to have all kinds of qualifiers and say, well, we don't know about exactly how this happened, but our best evidence says it went this way. And this other thing, again, we're not entirely sure exactly how it happened, but our best evidence is it went this other way. And they'll kind of construct a really hypothetical scenario with lots of qualifiers pointing at what we don't know. But that's a modern way of expressing things. In the ancient world, they didn't do that. And ancient audiences, like the one that the author of Genesis was trying to reach, would not have been interested in that kind of scientific reconstruction. They didn't even have the concepts developed yet necessary to do that kind of research. And so consequently, what the author of Genesis was interested in doing was telling the audience what God did, and offering an accurate theological account of early origins, but he really wasn't interested in the scientific blow-by-blow that modern audiences are interested in. And so because of this difference in interests, he just presents a straightforward narrative. And if you had asked him, well, does that mean that like in this opening chapter of Genesis, you're not being fully literal and you're structuring the work of the creator in this literary way? He would have said, sure, I know I'm doing that. But then as we go later in Genesis, we get closer to the author's own day and he has more information. And so the book becomes more historical as it goes. The earlier in Genesis you go, the more literary it becomes in its expression of truth. The later in Genesis you go, the more literal it becomes in its expression of history. So literary early on, literal later, if you want to think about it that way. And scholars have recognized there's kind of a dividing line. There's more than one, but the most obvious dividing line is between Genesis 11 and Genesis 12. The material in Genesis 1 through 11 is much more literary, and the material once Abraham comes on the scene in Genesis 12 is much more historical. And so we can even map sections within the book where we can tell its literary character changes. But the basic reason why Genesis reads as it does is because ancient accounts were not written like modern ones, and they were written as a straightforward narrative instead of being loaded up with all kinds of scholarly qualifiers. And there also was different levels of information available to the author at the time of writing, and the further back in time you go in Genesis, the less information was available, and so the more literary stylings had to be applied to express the truths that were known from that time.
Thanks, Angelo. I hope that was helpful to you. We have to take a break, so we'll be right back with more Open Forum with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live right after this.
Your questions, Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
St. John Paul II stated that, for the disciple of Christ, evangelization is a duty, an obligation of love. And the Catechism of the Catholic Church states that evangelization is necessary for salvation.
So we know we're called, but how do we do it?
St. Paul Street Evangelization can help. To learn more, contact us at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Want the latest pro-life news? Want it delivered? Sign up. It's free. EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, your source for everything happening now in the fight to protect the sanctity of human life. New episodes delivered every week to your inbox. So if you really want to know,
sign up today.
Go to EWTN.com/pro-life today.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live Open Forum with Jimmy Akin, our guest both hours today. Hey, donors to Catholic Answers can get a free copy of Purgatory is for Real, Carlo's new book. You just go over to Catholic.com and you look for the Purgatory is for Real tile at the bottom of the page, and you can get your free copy. It's full of all kinds of, well, actually, a lot of information about purgatory that you might need to answer the basic questions about purgatory, but a lot of stuff you never thought of about purgatory. Purgatory is for real. Good news about the afterlife for those who aren't perfect yet. Available for free if you visit Catholic.com and look for the Purgatory is for Real tile at the bottom of the page. Let us see. Jake in Queen Creek, Arizona, watching on YouTube is next. Jake, your question for Jimmy.
Hi there. Can you hear me all right?
You sound great, Jake.
Perfect. I just had a question regarding the different types of churches. I know that after all the looking I've been doing into the Catholic faith so far, one thing that I have yet to do that I was planning on doing is actually visit a Catholic church or the Catholic parish and talk with people, get a chance to ask more people in person some of the questions I have. But one thing that confused me, because obviously looking for a parish is a big ordeal in general, but I've noticed that in the Catholic Church there are several different types of rites. I noticed there's a Roman Latin rite, a Byzantine rite. I even saw a Chaldean rite. So my question today was, what are the differences between those rites, and is there a specific church, a specific rite of church that I should visit?
So they're all equally Catholic churches. You're welcome to visit any or all of them. None is intrinsically preferable to any other. They are all different, valid expressions of the Catholic faith. The one that is most common in this part of the world is the Latin Rite, and it's the one that most American Catholics belong to, but not all. There are also lots of Catholics who come from different Eastern Catholic churches, and there are, more than 20 of those, and 20 different Catholic traditions. They're all equally legitimate expressions of the Catholic faith. They're all equally Catholics. They're not all equally Roman Catholics. The Roman Catholic is a term that applies to a member of the Latin Rite. They would be Chaldean Catholics or Maronite Catholics or Syro-Malabar Catholics or what have you, depending on which different rite they come from. A rite, properly speaking, is a is not it's not another word for a church. It's a reference to the type of liturgy and language and custom that are used in a church. And in addition to the Latin rite, there are 5 other major rites. You mentioned the Byzantine rite. That's a rite that has historical origins in Byzantium, which was a Greek-speaking area in Europe. You've probably heard of the Byzantine Empire, which was it had its capital in Constantinople, or modern Istanbul in Turkey. You also mentioned the Chaldean rite that has its origin in Iraq, and so major centers there would be like Baghdad and Mosul and places like that. These days, there are a lot of immigrants and families who've been here for a generation or two from that part of the world. So there will be some differences. Now, just like here in a Latin Rite church in America, most of them will be speaking a vernacular language like English or Spanish or sometimes other languages. Some Latin Rite churches will use the historical language of Latin, which is, of course, the original language that the Latin Rite used. You'll see similar phenomena in other Eastern Catholic churches. For example, if you go to the Chaldean church you mentioned, they'll have some of their services in English, a vernacular language. They may have some of them in Arabic, another vernacular language, because there are Arabic speakers. And then they'll have some in Aramaic, which was their historical language of worship. I was interested once I was at the local Chaldean church, because we have a Chaldean cathedral here in the San Diego area, St. Peter's Chaldean. And I was there, and the bishop at the time was preaching. He was the most forceful Catholic preacher I've ever seen. He was going on and on. He's waving his hands. He's basically shouting his sermon. And I knew I'd been taking Aramaic, and I knew enough Aramaic that I'm getting the message he's talking about God's love and how much God loves us. But occasionally he would switch into English for a moment and say, like, "You are all sons and daughters of God," and then right back into Aramaic. And
that'll wake you up.
Yeah. But he kept using this one word I didn't know. And I nudged the guy next to me. I said, "Hey, what does this word mean?" And he says, "I don't know. I only speak Arabic." So it can be an interesting intercultural experience going to these different churches, and consequently, I'd encourage you as you have time and opportunity, Jake, to do that, because Christ didn't will that all of his followers be exactly the same. He willed there to be a diversity in his church that enriches it, and it's great to explore the different ways that God's grace is manifested in different parts of the Catholic family.
Thanks, Jake. I hope that's helpful to you. I do think everybody here at Catholic Answers considers it a great blessing that we're smack dab in about the second biggest, I think, Chaldean community in the United States.
Yeah,
it's a great thing for us. Let's go to Noah in Chicagoland, Illinois. We never get a call from Chicagoland, and now it's like 2 this week. Chicagoland, Illinois, watching on YouTube. Noah, happy to have you with us. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on the air. I am a Protestant traditionally, but I have been greatly encouraged by the Catholic Church and a lot of things that you guys teach. I understand a lot of the Catholic doctrines that distinguish Catholicism from Protestantism, and I understand reasoning behind them. I think my greatest apprehension right now toward the prospect of participating in Catholicism is just the approach to Christianity of emphasizing works. And I don't have a context really to understand actually what that is like in Catholicism. When I hear Catholic speakers in a sermon, I get the feeling often like they're kind of fantasizing almost, and not that I mean to assume they're doing it, but fantasizing the idea of doing works. And they kind of seem to kind of overemphasize that. And I've had many people tell me in the past that who are Protestants who say that the Catholic approach leads people to overemphasize the works, and they make it more about doing enough good things to be a Christian, and they don't take things like Bible reading or prayer very seriously, at least not outside of having to do it as an obligation. Or same thing with going to Mass.
Okay.
And not that I mean to assume that of anyone. Yeah.
No, is that what you'd like Jimmy
how
to?
do you respond to that?
Okay, fair enough.
Okay,
Jimmy.
Well,
how would you respond to someone who claims that? Thank you.
Okay, no.
Okay. And I'll do what I can in the time we have available. Noah, you're always welcome to call back, especially if I'm on the show, and be happy to help out further because I have a background in this area as a former Protestant myself. I think the first thing that has to be done is look at who you're comparing, because it's very easy to compare on-fire Protestants with Catholics who aren't engaged in their faith. But that's no more fair than comparing on-fire Catholics with Protestants who are not engaged in their faith. There's lots of lukewarm Catholics or cultural Catholics. There's lots of lukewarm Protestants or cultural Protestants. And so the first thing we need to do if we're doing comparisons of this nature is make sure we're comparing apples to apples. Let's look at Catholics who are actively engaged in their faith and Protestants who are actively engaged in their faith. They have a lot of similarities. They also have some differences. And sometimes those differences are exaggerated because of the history of the relationship between Catholics and Protestants. At the time of the Reformation, a theological narrative that got established in Protestant circles was the idea that Catholics are too focused on works, and they're not focused enough on faith or not focused enough on the Bible. Well, in individual cases, that may be true, but it also became a kind of talking point in Protestant circles. And just like talking points today, when let's say you're listening to Republicans talk about Democrats or Democrats talk about Republicans, there's a good bit of animosity there. And actually, their talking points are often exaggerated. They might contain an element of truth, but often they're rather misleading. And the same thing tends to be true about Protestant talking points about Catholics and Catholic talking points about Protestants, especially historically when the animosities were stronger between the two communities. They really would straw man each other a lot. These days, there's been a lot done to help Catholics and Protestants understand each other better, and Catholics, we do have an emphasis on good works. I mean, St. Paul says we were created in Christ for the purpose of doing good works. But Scripture is God's Word. We read Scripture at every single Catholic worship service. It's a central part of the liturgy. We read multiple books from it. Every Sunday, there's a guaranteed homily. There are Catholic Bible studies. There are Catholic books about Scripture. I'm the author of some myself. I hope that's somewhat helpful. I'd like, Noah, if we can, to send you a couple of my books. One of them is called The Drama of Salvation, and it goes into the faith and works issue and what convergence there's been on that subject in recent years. And also my book, The Bible is a Catholic Book, to help you appreciate Scripture from a Catholic perspective.
Noah, if you'll just hang on, Annie will pick up the phone, and as soon as I put you on hold here, and you can give her your address, and we will send those to you. Thanks very much for the call, Noah, and I hope you will continue to call and continue this conversation, and we appreciate how polite and friendly you are when you do call. Jimmy, give us an update, one more quick update on what's dropping tomorrow on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World.
Okay, so the year is 1857. The new president-elect, Buchanan, almost dies twice, and dozens of people do. Hundreds are sickened. Death at the National Hotel.
Death at the National Hotel. Tomorrow, for our Friday edition, Patrick Novakoski is going to be here with us, and we're going to talk about how Pope John Paul II changed the world. As many people know, today is the feast day for Pope John Paul II, Saint Pope John Paul II. So join us for a great conversation with Patrick Novakoski tomorrow. Jimmy Akin, thank you. As always, it's a really fun 2 hours with you.
My pleasure.
You know what? Thank you, Eric, for the groovy music. That's what really made the show today. It was the groovy music. Thanks, Annie, on the phones. Thanks, Sarah, on the video. We'll see you tomorrow, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.